Chesky, 40 Ralph Place. So I just want to start with, I think with number 6 is how efficient is styrofoam recycling? And we're paying, it doesn't seem like a large amount of money, but it's $3,000 for Long Hill, I guess, to do our styrofoam recycling. And is it mandatory to recycle styrofoam? And is that like an energy, I mean, is that like beneficial? It seems like if it is beneficial that they're recycling it, that I don't understand why we would pay for something that's creating a a recycled product or recycled base product or something else.
Yeah. I don't know if it's mandated, but I think it's done for the environment. It's good for the environment.
Is it?
Right?
Yeah.
How? Yeah.
Where does styrofoam end up?
In the garbage?
Where does that end up?
Dad, can you do it with me?
It doesn't break down, so it's not good for the environment.
Yeah, but how much energy is being used to recycle the styrofoam?
To answer that question.
Okay, we can, if you can, please get back to me with that, because I'm not convinced that it's of any environmental benefit. Yeah, it probably ends up in the in a garbage dump somewhere, but I'd like to learn why specifically we're spending money to get. Okay, thank you. The other question I have is obviously about the redevelopment plan that's being proposed. And what I'm kind of curious about is what's the process to get a resolution for the redevelopment on the agenda? Like, how did that start out? Like, what what kicked that off to get it on the agenda today?
Matt's here. Typically well, I'll let him answer, but typically it goes to the professional, so I'm gonna let the redevelopment attorney, not Joseph, answer that.
Okay.
Sure. So good evening, Mayor, council members. Let me start just by sort of clarifying the residents' comment. There is not a redevelopment plan on the agenda for tonight. What you have before you tonight is a resolution that would authorize and direct the Township Planning Board to study certain properties to determine whether or not they meet one or more criteria as an area in need of redevelopment, right? Which is step 1 in a longer process that I know we've talked about before, about getting from property to powers of redevelopment. A redevelopment plan, which is effectively the zoning for those properties, if they are determined to be an area in need of redevelopment.
This isn't, so I used the wrong words. I didn't mean plan. I mean, specifically, how did this resolution end up on the agenda? Like, what was the process? Were you the one that suggested it getting on the agenda?
No, so this really started this past September when Mike Mistretta and I came before the mayor and council and gave a lengthy presentation about the township's current status of their affordable housing obligation and their obligation and what the township should be doing going forward with respect to its affordable housing plan, particularly as we get towards July of 2025, when round 3 of our affordable housing obligation is over and round 4 begins, and a new affordable housing obligation, no doubt, gets put upon the township. So part of I can go through what Mike had talked about, but to specifically answer your question, Mike talked about the township putting together a plan that included potential areas that could accommodate affordable housing projects in the downtown area. And these few lots are 3 lots that are potentially areas that could satisfy some of the township's affordable housing obligation.
So back to the town council discussed what areas and went back to Mike Mistretta?
No. These areas were identified through from a property owner to Mike and me, and from Mike and me to the council tonight. All as a follow-up to our September presentation.
So the property owner approached Mike and you?
Correct.
And then you decided that these were possible properties that could be used for our affordable housing.
So the township's housing element and fair share plan calls for affordable housing to be in the downtown area. These are properties in the downtown area. So they satisfy that requirement. Now they come to the council, and the council gets to decide whether or not they want to refer them to the planning board and have the planning board study them to figure out whether or not they meet one or more criteria as an area in need of redevelopment.
Okay, so basically, I'm trying to figure out the flow. The flow is the property owners came directly to you and Mike Mistretta and proposed that we want a redevelopment plan we want to have this property for a redevelopment.
They want us to consider whether or not
Okay.
these properties qualify as an area in need of redevelopment.
Okay, and then you suggested it to the council or to the mayor, and the mayor put it on the agenda for today to go up to it for a vote. Okay, I think I got it. Were plans submitted yet?
Again, this is, so half a step back, right? Plans are only if there is a property determined to be an area in need of redevelopment. We do not have any powers relative to a property unless we have an area in need of redevelopment. So what we are talking about today before the governing body is simply referring whether or not to refer property to the planning board and let them study it to determine whether or not it fits one or more criteria as an area in need of redevelopment.
Could we meet the affordable housing obligations without declaring this property in need of redevelopment?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Is it possible, could we meet the affordable housing mandate or whatever you want to call it without declaring this properties in need of redevelopment?
Not likely, no.
I'm not asking if it's likely or not, can we? Is it possible, is it legally possible? Or are you saying that in order for us to meet an affordable housing obligation, we legally have to declare this property in need of redevelopment?
You don't legally have to do it.
Okay.
But you
There
won't
is a
satisfy
chance-
your requirement without it.
Well, if somebody built affordable, I'm just giving a hypothetical, if somebody built affordable housing and they said, I just want to build whatever 30 units of affordable housing right here, and it was within the zoning, they could technically, that would meet the obligations and we would be okay, right?
Sure.
Okay. So there was a meeting, was that a meeting or is that an email or how did you contact with them? Was that an email or an in-person meeting?
Both.
Both. Okay. Okay, and then you said that it's not likely that we meet the affordable housing obligation unless we do a redevelopment. We end up with a redevelopment plan here. Is that that was your comment, I think, just a couple minutes ago, right?
Yep.
Is that just because of the density, the high density? We need the high density there, or they won't develop it unless we offer them the high density? Is that the reasoning behind that?
It's multiple factors, right? It's the zoning for the property. Does the property currently allow for the intended use? Does it allow for the intended use at the appropriate density? Does it allow for the intended use at the appropriate height, the appropriate setbacks? All the things that we get to determine through the redevelopment process that you can't otherwise determine for one or more particular properties. It's so that we can contract with the specific developer that we want in order to build these projects. You can't otherwise, without redevelopment, just go contract with somebody and agree to get them to, move forward with a project. It is all of those powers that redevelopment bring to it. The financial tools that are also become available, all of those things are generally necessary in order to make these projects work.
Okay, so and another thing is, so what you're basically saying is that the driver of our push to have this land deemed in need of redevelopment, it used to be called blighted, I don't know if it's still called blighted or not, but in need of redevelopment is because our town has another need, which happens to be this affordable housing thing. So we're going to go try to look for a property that we can squeeze into this definition of in need of redevelopment, and we're gonna try to find something that can be put into that definition, so we can use it as a tool to meet our obligations. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, roughly. I don't agree with everything you just said, but
Okay, so, because is it still deemed blighted? Are we still using
yes.
that
Yep.
term? So we're deeming those properties, and I just want to make it clear that it's the property that is being deemed blighted, not the buildings on it, right? So
It was,
if you knock down the buildings, we're still claiming that that property is blighted.
It depends on the circumstance. It is often the structures themselves. For example, vacant strip malls are a category. Vacant office space is a category that can be deemed blighted under this under the local redevelopment housing law. So it can be the buildings, not just the
Okay.
land.
Okay.
No. I mean,
And one of those is, I forget, I think it's number H or something, I forget off the top of my head, but it's basically a catch-all that allows any property basically in Berkeley Heights could be deemed in need of redevelopment, correct?
the one reason why.
No, that's not correct.
Do you know what H, do you have H in front of you by any chance?
No, I don't. Well,
Okay.
you might be thinking of section 3, which is a property that's necessary to effectuate a redevelopment plan, but that's a property that's already next to a property that does meet the criteria.
Okay,
You
I don't
cannot
have,
simply designate any property in the entire municipality as an area needed
do you
redevelopment.
have H? Is it H?
Yeah, the Supreme Court.
No, so it depends on multiple use regulations. Yeah, okay, well, I'll look at that later, I don't want to quote it. Intent of it. Might be, let's see. Yeah, just,
I give you the
yes.
time, but
yes, I'm just about done.
You're the one that has to go through every branch and make it.
I'll take care of it.
And who's the developer on this?
There is no developer,
Well, who's the owner of the property?
Dr. Fan. Certain of the properties, Dr. Fan.
Okay. And he was the one that sent you the email or whatever to contact you regarding this.
He was the property owner that reached out to us, correct?
Okay, and one last thing, was you mentioned that there was, for the round of COA, that our zoning was locked in for whatever you want, whatever wording you used. You said that zoning map, that we were not able to change that zoning map because of the
Well,
code.
some of those are properties, not necessarily this area, there's certain properties you'll see they're very specific, and they were zoned and set in their own unique zoning as part of the affordable housing agreement, so they are staying in their own unique zone. It doesn't mean they could be already developed or not developed yet, but we just can't change the zoning to add them to a bigger district.
Was the reason that done is to allow for the proper zoning to allow for the affordable housing to be built? I assume as it's part of,
I was not involved.
Do you know that? Jessup? Matt Jessup?
I couldn't hear the question, Tom.
Oh, the question was just that, the map was, I don't know if it's a better term to that, it was basically mandated by the courts that we couldn't change our zoning map for the affordable housing during the last round of affordable housing.
We created certain zones in the last round,
Like,
specific, like, I think the county trade was one of them, it's its own EX something, or I don't remember, there's like 2 or 3 zones that are property specific, that were all tied to the last round of affordable housing.
You know, was that in order to ensure that we could meet our affordable housing goals?
So I can't really comment on that, Tom. I didn't represent the township at the time in connection with that matter. Certainly, generally speaking, certain properties as part of the settlement with Fair Share Housing Center may have been zoned a certain way in order to effectuate affordable housing. The township, Berkeley Heights, has used the powers of redevelopment for, as far as I know, every project that they've done to satisfy their agreement with Fair Share Housing Center and their court-approved housing element fair share plan. They've used redevelopment for all of them.
And just my final question is, the main purpose of the redevelopment law is, in my opinion, twofold, and I just want to confirm with you, is to allow a density higher than what's allowed by the current zoning, And for the second thing is to allow pilots, a form of tax abatements that can go out to these developers to incentivize development. Is that true?
That's pretty limited, Tom, right? There are multiple reasons that the township would use redevelopment, or that the multiple powers that the redevelopment law gives. I've named a bunch of others. You sort of cherry picked two things. Sure, those are two things that you can do. You can also reduce density. You don't have to grant pilots in a redevelopment area. There are a whole host of other powers that are granted. You've mentioned two of them, but again,
Well,
they're not
the only
involved with every
reason is
project. They
because
work both ways.
I'm somewhat curious as why we're pushing down this road when we don't necessarily have plans in front of us that would require us to do anything other than what I just mentioned. So why are we pushing forward? If you're the one that got this on the agenda, why are we pushing forward if those two aren't the reason why we're moving forward with this?
Because as we mentioned to the council and the public in September, the township has an unmet need of affordable housing. It's critically important that we do everything we can to comply with our previously adopted and court-approved housing element and fair share plan from 2017 that requires all those units to be downtown. And as Mike Mistretta said, the township should always have as a goal to satisfy those remaining units and to have a plan for those units, because it's the best way heading into 2025 for the township to keep control of the process to determine where the units go, what the project looks like, what the height may be, what the density may be, what the setbacks and parking and other requirements are. We want the township to be in control of that process. We don't want a court-appointed special master, fair share housing center lawyers, developers, and others in the room dictating how those things get settled. So the idea is to continue to act in accordance with the plan that the council previously adopted and has been complying with to date, and continue to find those opportunities where we can, where it makes sense, to create affordable housing opportunities. We are at the beginning stage tonight, if the council adopts a resolution, of determining whether or not these properties might be properties that could continue to help us satisfy our obligation to provide affordable housing.
Were other properties looked at, or is this specifically just honed in on these just because I guess the letter that you got, the email from the developer?
So again, the housing element fair share plan says all of this should be located in the downtown. So are we always looking for downtown opportunities? Yes. Is this one of the opportunities? Yes.
Okay. And so the apartments that are already being built were the decision from the town council and not by any law, it wasn't forced upon us by the legal means, or
We got sued. We got sued by
No,
several-
yeah, that's
Yeah.
wrong. That's wrong.
But what he's saying is that the reason we're going through this redevelopment law is so that we could keep control over the things. Were we in control or were we not in control of the properties by Kings?
Not at first. We were sued.
But
Right?
afterwards,
So
the agreement.
to the point I just
I understand
mentioned,
that. I'm
at
just
the
asking,
time, fair
I
share
understand
housing,
that, but who was the
court-appointed
final?
special master was in the room. Everybody else was in the room trying to dictate what ended up happening. And
Okay, I'm just, because the thing is, I think a lot of people in town are not happy with, especially the one right behind Kings, you mentioned the multiple stories and the size and just the location and how that looks. You mentioned that the courts were, we don't want the courts involved in that. But at the end, on the final design and everything, the courts weren't involved with that, right? That was something that I assume the planning board and the council signed off on. And it wasn't court, that specific design, that density and that everything was not necessarily court mandated.
So the unit count was, but the details were largely left to the redeveloper, the township, and the planning board.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
To be clear, the density was not voted on or